Like all right-thinking Christians, my favourite Christmas film is Die Hard. It takes place during the Christmas holidays. The setting is a Christmas party. It's got three, count them, 1, 2, 3 Christmas songs. Herod is present in the megalomaniacal German terrorist Hans Gruber, and the main character exhibits Christ-like sacrificial love to defend the innocent. Die Hard, the best Christmas movie, but what I want to speak to you today about is the second best Christmas movie, and indeed the subject of this reflection. Would you like a clue? It's one that not only majors on the well-known parts of the birth narrative, but it even delves into the elements of Jesus' less well-known childhood, some of the story that we heard today, borrowing imagery from the scriptures. And the giveaway clue is this: what connects Mary and Joseph and Peter and Kate McAllister? The answer, of course, is that they've both forgotten their children. Today we heard how Mary and Joseph managed to travel a day's walk before realizing that Jesus wasn't with them. The McAllisters managed to make it all the way to Paris before they realize that they've left their son Kevin at home in Chicago. The film, of course, is Home Alone. Again, I'm sure you're thinking, such an obvious choice for the second best Christmas film. Now, if for some reason you haven't got round to watching it this year, or God forbid, you've never watched it, let me give you a quick refresher. Kevin wishes his family would disappear. He's fed up of them. And a seemingly supernatural series of events result in his family waking up far too late on the morning that they're meant to be catching their plane and being in a terrible rush. They zoom off to the airport, having forgotten that Kevin, the previous night, in his grumpiness, ended up sleeping in the attic. Kevin realizes that he is indeed home alone, that his wish has come true. No longer does he have to follow his parents' rules. He doesn't have to get up at a certain hour. He doesn't have to spend his time doing boring activities. He is completely free. And now you'd expect him to be terrible at looking after himself. He's 8 years old in the movie, after all. But the masterstroke of the film is that, in fact, he's very competent at doing that. You see him doing the cooking and the cleaning. He goes out and he buys his groceries. He speaks to his neighbours. He irons his clothes. He survives remarkably well for an 8-year-old. Tension is added to the film when a couple of petty thieves who've been casing the rich neighbourhood that he lives in realize that he might well be on his own. And they decide that his house would make a great target for their festive theft. He fails to convince them that his parents are indeed there. And even though he can't manage that, he does, in what is probably the film's most memorable scenes, defeat them in the battle of the home. He uses broken baubles to stick in their feet. He uses swinging cans of paint and plenty of glue and a superheated door handle to burn their fingers. All of this is meant to point to the fact that when he does finally miss his family, and he does miss them while the assault on the house is taking place, it's not because he wasn't able to materially provide for himself, but rather he misses them because of what they mean to him. He's actually managed to get along in his life just fine, and yet he still wants his family to return. Far from being the burden that Kevin perceived it to be, the feeling of intensified community during Christmas was actually what he most deeply craved. His goofy separation from his family and his reunion speaks with remarkable receptivity to loneliness and to its antidote in meaningful community. In the end, Kevin realizes that he is more dependent, if not physically, then at least mentally and spiritually, than he cares to admit. Even his initial tactics pretending that he's not alone by arranging mannequins around the house and watching old mobster movies with them, only anticipates the presence of others which he so desperately needs. And this comes to its tangible expression in Old Man Marley, who ultimately rescues Kevin at the end of the film when he gets cornered by the two thugs by hitting them over the back of the head with a snow shovel. Evidently, Old Man Marley is the God character, because that's what God does, salvation, not the hitting with shovels. He's been gently offering Kevin advice throughout the film, and Old Man Marley ends up in a scene that you see from a distance being reconciled with his son, reflecting and mirroring Kevin's reconciliation with his own family. What does all this have to do with Jesus being lost by his parents? Well, what's really struck me over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, I suppose, over this Christmas period, is the privilege of being able to seek isolation. The privilege of being able to seek isolation. Are you familiar with the phrase me time? Or people saying, I just want to get away from it all. I need a break. As an introvert, I well know that feeling, and there have been parties where it's not been above me to sneak out to the car with my book, or even lock myself in the loo or a little cupboard that I can find to get away from all of the noise of it. But as I say, that is in fact a great privilege. The need for time alone presupposes that the rest of the time you live a rich, busy, fulfilled life, surrounded by other people. But for many people, that's simply not true. Research by the Church Urban Fund ranks the number one social issue in our parish as elderly loneliness. A full half of the homes occupied in this parish are single occupancy. And the weight of that issue is never more apparent than it is at Christmas. Mary's voice rung out prophetically to me from the Gospel as she berates Jesus in presumably only the way that his mother really could. Child, why have you treated us like this? Child, why have you treated us like this? And I suspect that some of us might find ourselves occasionally falling under the same judgment from the generation above us. I know that there have been times in my rich, fulfilling life that I'm privileged to lead when I've chosen not to visit or to call because I thought, well, I need some me time, or I need a break, or I need to get away from it all. When I should have realized that it might have been the only call or the only visit that that person received all day. Having spent time over the last week, first at the Christmas Day lunch that's put on up at the centre for 40 people from our community who would otherwise be alone at Christmas. And then on St. Stephen's Day and the following days, visiting the sick and the housebound members of our communion, taking them their Christmas communion. And then after Christmas, over the last few days in this church, the many pastoral conversations with the literally hundreds of people who've been filling these pews. If you haven't been over the last few days during the day, you would marvel. There have sometimes been this many people sitting in the church at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, who have come after Christmas to find a place of peace and a place of encounter with God. And the thing that I heard at each of those events, each of those times speaking to people, was two things really. One, a repeated call about loneliness experienced by so many of our neighbours. And secondly, a very positive thing about the importance and the great value of the work that we do as a church and that other splendid local organisations lead in providing companionship and breaking isolation. So I want to thank you today for supporting me and this church to carry out this work. I want to thank those who drove older people to and from events and do so to and from services all year. I want to thank all those who regularly visit. I want to thank those who bought and wrapped presents for the Christmas lunch. And I want to thank all of you who, by your financial support of this church, enable us as clergy to spend time serving this parish.